guys see that?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
Just let me know whenever you're ready.
Okay, well, I can give it a shot. I'm ready to go. All right, so my name's Brian. I'm up in Vermont, and the topic I'm presenting is soil health, plant diversity, and bee floral rewards. Soil health, it supports plant health, and healthy, diverse plant communities provide diverse floral resources. Diverse floral resources provide better nutritional opportunities for honeybees. So to understand this, we need to start from the ground up. So we're going to do a little bit about soil health. So what is soil health? Soil is one of the most important parts of the plant's environment. It's the medium in which roots are anchored and from which nutrients, water, and oxygen are obtained. Soil is a complex mixture of inorganic materials derived from the erosion of rocks and organic matter or humus, the decomposed remains of plants and animals. So with the inorganic portion, it's divided into three classes defined by particle size: sand, silt, and clay. And the mixture of those is called loams. The proportions of each material determine the water holding capacity of a particular soil. This inorganic mixture, though, doesn't typically supply many nutrients. That's left up to the organic matter. This is a great diagram. It shows the food web of a compost pile, but for our sake, it's healthy soil. Down in the lower left, you can see the organic materials, the plants, the food waste, etc. And then you have your first level of consumers or decomposers: bacteria, fungi, mold, worms, millipedes, etc. Then a second level, such as springtails, mites, beetles, protozoa, nematodes. And a third level consumers, such as ants, centipedes, different sorts of beetles, all living in the soil, which is what cycles the organic material and converts them into plant available nutrients. Healthy soil also resists erosion, suppresses insect pests, plant pathogens, and sustains biodiversity. Plants require both oxygen and water, and the root zone for optimal growth in soil, water, and air are held in the pore spaces between soil particles and aggregates. Surface soil that is best for plant growth contains about 50% solid materials and 50% open or pore space. In an ideal condition, that pore space should be about 25% air and 25% water. So what is healthy soil? Healthy soil absorbs, holds, and releases water. It exchanges gases. It converts nutrients that are tied up in organic matter into a plant available nutrients. Healthy soil also, like I said, it resists erosion, suppresses insect pests, plant pathogens, and sustains biodiversity. And it's the foundation for plant communities. It doesn't determine which flowers bees visit, but like I said, it does determine the foundation for plant communities. So for example, in a 2022 study done at Penn State, it showed how nutrients in the soil can impact floral traits. By using cucumbers and bumblebees, they found that higher amounts of nitrogen and phosphorus in the soil resulted in faster plant growth, which is typical of nitrogen, but it also influenced floral traits. It increased the number and size of flowers, the pollen number and size, nectar secretion rates, and sugar ratios. So soil health is definitely important for plants. So now that we're all soil scientists, we know that soil supports the plants both structurally and nutritionally, and plants produce the flowers. So the flowers produce the rewards. So let's scratch the surface of plants before we see how a diverse landscape can influence floral rewards and inevitably nutritional health for the bees. So at a very basic level, plants are in their own kingdom, and flowering seed-producing plants are in their own class. Physiologically, plants have a root zone or a root system and a shoot system. Nutrients in the soil dissolve into the water, and the roots soak this up through root hairs in a process called osmosis. The plants create their own carbohydrates in the form of glucose through photosynthesis. So basically, plants, if you're not familiar with this, plants use light, and it breaks apart the water that they soak up, H2O. And so that breaks it apart, it releases the oxygen, it absorbs CO2 from the atmosphere, and it combines that with the hydrogen to form C6H12O6, which is sugar. So it's glucose, fructose, and the plant uses those carbohydrates for its own energy needs, which brings us to its reproductive system. So the reproductive system we're all familiar with, but in particular, the pollen and the nectar are the rewards, and they're created by the plants. The anthers on the plant, part of the male portion, create the pollen, and then there are glands at the base of the filaments that secrete the nectar. Where inside the anther are pollen sacs, where specialized cells undergo meiosis and eventually develop into pollen grains. When those grains are mature, the anther opens up and releases them. And this is where we make the transition from plant reproduction to bee nutrition. Because what the plant produces as its male productive material becomes one of the most nutritionally important foods available to the honeybee. So pollen is pretty fascinating. These are different examples of pollen granules. You can see how they've evolved with certain characteristics to aid in this process of pollination, like spikes or hooks, and it adheres to the pollinator's legs and bodies. Plants have evolved to have the nectar in places that forces the pollinators to interact with the anthers and stamen in order to reach the nectar. Plants and flowers vary wildly in their shape and how they position all of these elements, and many times it's been an evolutionary process that coincides with their pollinators. So what does a bee actually need from these rewards? This is a great Dr. Seeley quote, that pollen and nectar are the main rewarding stimuli driving the foraging behavior of bees. And we know this, but we really need to dig a little deeper to understand it. So bees require carbohydrates, the sugar and nectar and honey. They require protein, and part of that is amino acids. They require lipids or fatty acids, vitamins, minerals, water. These nutrients must be present in the right ratio for honeybees to survive and thrive. So carbohydrates, bees need carbohydrates as an energy source. A worker bee needs about 11 milligrams of dry sugar each day, which translates into about 22 milliliters of 50% sugar syrup. And at that rate, a colony of 50,000 bees would need about 2 pounds of 50% sugar syrup per day, or about a half gallon of nectar. And that doesn't include brood rearing or other activities. A colony this size will consume almost 700 pounds of nectar per year. Protein, it provides bees with protein, minerals, lipids, amino acids, vitamins. Amino acids must be obtained externally because they can't be synthesized, and so they are obtained from pollen and pollen only. The collection by the colony ranges from 10 to 26 kilograms per year, and honeybees are provided with, if they're provided with insufficient pollen or pollen with low nutritional value, rearing decreases, workers' lives are shortened, and it could be a cause for colony decline or collapse. Let's see. So part part of the protein also is royal jelly, and it's created with about 2/3 water and 1/3 of dry matter, which is composed of carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and ash. It also contains trace minerals, enzymes, antibacterial and antibiotic components, and trace amounts of vitamin C. The total proteins consist of 52 different types of proteins. So you can see that royal jelly is highly nutritious for the larvae, and they grow exponentially in the first 4 to 5 days, where the egg could weigh about 0.17 milligrams, and a 5-day-old larvae is 130. So fatty acids are the precursor for some important hormones, such as the molting hormone, which regulates growth. Others strengthen the immune system and supports the development of the nervous system, which both are essential for foraging and navigation. Vitamins, nurse bees are thought to need vitamin B and absorbic acid for brood rearing. And water, they forage for water for two main purposes. One is to dilute honey so it can be added to brood food, and then the second is to use water for evaporative cooling. So pollen quality can be measured by two methods: crude protein levels and the composition of amino acids, 10 of which are considered essential. And different pollens have different nutritional values. So one study that was done in 2024, which was conducted at York University in Toronto, they collected and analyzed over 50 different types of pollen. Part of their findings was that essential amino acids and fatty acids show a diverse array of floral resources that are provided to bees' nutritional needs. So if bees need all of these different nutrients, where do they get them from? Not one source. Several studies have concluded that bees need a variety of food sources. One quote: "Rather than seeking an optimal pollen source, a diversified approach incorporating a variety of plants is more beneficial for bee health." Another: "The diversity of floral resources is instrumental in providing bees and other pollinators with the necessary nutrients, including proteins and lipids, which are imperative for their development, immune function, and overall health." Studies suggest that bees feeding with a single type of pollen are not as healthy as those on a variety of pollen, with the modern way of agriculture increasingly larger areas of monoculture crops. Honeybee health might be adversely affected. So soil health, again, this is what I started with. Soil health creates plant diversity. Plant diversity creates diverse floral resources, and diverse floral resources create better nutritional opportunities for bees. Sorry, I need a drink of water real quick. So health, I guess that's it. That's all I have.